Hello, Brie, and welcome to the Make Life Rich Movement podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so glad to be here, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Everyone, we are going to talk about something I think it's pretty likely you've never heard of before, and I'm really excited to be the one to bring you into knowledge about return home. And today we are speaking with Brie Smith. She is one of the funeral directors and office managers of Return Home located in Washington. And they are a Terramation funeral service, which we will get into. But the general basis of it is that they allow your final act as a human being to support the earth by gently transforming your human remains into soil the way that nature intended, which I find to be just so intimate and poetic and just a blessing, a miracle. I don't know. In 2025, especially the more tech these days, this feels like such a beautiful act and service. So I'm so thankful for your time today and for your knowledge and what you're going to share today. I'm
Thank you.
Yeah, so thankful first for the profession that you find yourself in. You have a 13-year career within the death care industry. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started into this field and what brought you to it?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I actually was really sick. I started passing out a lot, and it
Mm.
turns out it was POTS. Some people are familiar with that, some aren't, but it's a tachycardic episodes, and I go into fight or flight a lot. So essentially, I had to drop out of school. I was going to school to become a sports medicine doctor. That was my hope. And I had to take a couple years downtime and just kind of figure out my body. And so when I found myself on the other side of that, there were some options that were available to me with the classes that I had already taken. And so I decided that mortuary science was kind of a calling for me because I had taken an advanced, like an AP anatomy and physiology class my senior year of high school. And I rebuilt this face, and it's a long story, but shortly, you put erasers on a skull to match the sex and the race of an individual that's given to you, but you don't get a picture of them. And I ended up recreating this face that it was very much the likeness of the person. So I had this gift of kind of sculpture and kind of recreating that I didn't know I had until then. So those two things kind of pushed me into a 1 year consolidated mortuary science program. We do go to school for this. And so I went to Mesa, Arizona for that schooling and came out of the other side having passed and completed two national board exams and decided Washington State was the place that I wanted to settle in because of how forward thinking they are in their death care. I didn't know at the time that this would be happening, but I knew at the time that this was a beautiful region with forward minded people, and I wanted to work around these types of people.
Love that. My goodness. For those that aren't aware, the death care industry is certainly an industry and one that has a lot of commercial backing through a lot of the decision making that happens. And you'd probably be surprised to know that a lot of the funeral care decisions that are available to you in your state may be mandated and dictated by your government officials. So there's a lot of very interesting red tape that you may never interact with until the unfortunate day of needing to work through funeral planning and just dealing with the remains of your loved one. And I really do admire Washington for the multitude of ways in which they have certainly advance the compassion of end of life care and death care. And I think Terramation is one of those really beautiful things that just makes so much sense for being born and like kind of brought to life in Washington because of that really deep connection to just the nature around you. And it feels so serendipitous of an option to be able to give to the people specifically that live in Washington state. Um, but before we jumped on, we had connected a bit about, kind of just both being people that really admire the power and the presence of nature and allowing it to kind of be, a staple in our lives. And the current way in which most people are finding themselves at end of life is either through cremation, which is, you are still returned to the earth in one manner or another if your ashes are spread. But most are in a box for eternity where they're not able to return that carbon and all the essence of what their life was back to the earth. And uh, discovering you guys on Instagram, thank goodness for the random reels that pop up every now and then. I was like, what is this? And I discovered you shortly after. It was about 2 years after my father had passed away. I think you just opened. It was in 2021, like I think
Mhm.
summertime. And it just struck me so deeply that I just like really wished you guys were like 10 years further ahead so that like it could have been spread across the US and this could have been something that my father could have taken advantage of because he absolutely would have chosen to become soil. It seems like it is also a popular option as you guys are really making such an impact for those who find themselves in the space of grieving or pre-planning their end of life services. But to synopsize all that, could you just tell us a little bit about how Return Home came to be? Because it's a beautiful thought to be able to bury your body naturally out in the forest and just let it do its thing, but that's illegal, guys. So this
Right.
is the very next best option.
Right. So it all started back in, I would say like 2019 was when Washington State legalized natural organic reduction. So we call it Terramation, but the legal term, natural organic reduction, shortened up to NOR, was passed. And the CEO now of our company, Micah Truman, was basically sitting at a table with his mother and a couple of her friends from New York, and they were all discussing uh, whether or not this was something that they would be interested in. It was big news. It was all across the state. And they started talking, and the ladies in New York were like, heck yeah, fly us out here. We would do it. And they got to talking. Micah's mother is an environmentalist and had worked previously throughout her career in that way. So he was already in that mindset going into what ended up being a business opportunity. And you said, this is an industry, but Micah has this really beautiful notion that he says, and it is we wanted to create something that both does good and is good. And that's something that is really, really rare. And especially in the profession of funeral, we use a lot of chemical. I mean, I'm an embalmer. I'm licensed to do that. I remember doing it. And at first it was this scientific, amazing thing I could do. And it was kind of surgical. And then over time it became something that just kind of didn't resonate with me anymore. And I thought it only necessary with reconstruction and having to, rebuild someone. But Micah was always in this mindset of natural and gentle and passive. And so what he did is he reached out to a gentleman. His name is John Paul. He is a composting PhD and actually one of my favorite people on the planet. He is absolutely beautiful inside and out, and his wife and his family. But Micah reached out to John Paul. He's this mortality composter. So if anybody wants to look into mortality composting, you will find that essentially it's the composting of animals after maybe a mass devastation. So say you have swine flu breakout, and they would compost the pigs so that they can be reused and reintegrated into the earth in a meaningful way. And I don't know if that's a good example. I don't know off the top of my head if you can compost swine flu and if it comes out the other side clean. But the point of that is to know that John Paul was essentially taking bone and flesh and composting it and turning it into something beautiful and viable. And so Micah knew that he had this training. They connected, and through 2.5 years of research and development, developed this system that we call Terramation, because specifically our process at Return Home is the gentle breakdown. It is the passive, hands off, gentle breakdown of the human body over a course of 60 to 90 days into compost. And so that's what we did. We 2.5 years of making sure that the vessels worked properly, to make sure that the air flowed through, to ensure that the HVAC in our system allowed families to enter the space and be present, because we know how important it is to move through your grief by being present with your loved one. And so it took a long time, and we ended up opening in June of 2021, and we served our first couple of families. They were young, the people who we served at first. I think that this was a progressive thing. So we're talking people in their 30s and 40s were choosing us for themselves before they passed away. Um,
Yes.
it was overwhelming at first because we're used to returning, small urn-sized portions of remains to people. And in this case, we're putting people in the vessel with like a 3-to-1 ratio of the organics to their body weight. So we're returning almost a cubic yard of terramated remains to people. So there was a lot of learning that went into after we opened for service. But Micah built this business on the idea that we could both provide a beautiful, honest, good, do good service that also is a good business model that can pay its employees well, that has good, vacation and benefits. We're trying really hard to build something that's good for everyone involved. And that's, I'm really proud of that with Return Home, that we've been able to kind of create that. And it was all from Micah's ideas of what it meant to be good in business.
Mm, man. I think Return Home is a really beautiful testament to what can be done when you think about good from the beginning and allow still, the creativity and the experience and the mindset of everyone involved to push forward to get to the success part and making sure the business is set up properly. But to have good at the heart of it, just it rings through every single thing that you guys do. It's so completely apparent that this was far more about honoring the process, the true natural process of decomposition, which is uncomfortable to hear and it's uncomfortable to say. But it's also sad that it's uncomfortable to hear and uncomfortable to say, because that just means that we are so truly far removed from the true essence of what it is to be a human being. I think it's truly remarkable the way in which you guys have been able to navigate what I imagine were not only just like logistical twists and turns, but also likely having to create an urn that would fit the size and need of what you were looking for, that was probably more in the landscaping area of development. And you had to kind of contact somebody and be like, hey, we got to create this thing. Like there's just so many hoops that you had to go through to get to where you're at. And I just want to appreciate that and that process, because all of that was done with the effort and the intention of just giving people the ability to honor their loved ones through what is a very important part of the grieving process for those left behind. And it is shortened so drastically the like in our current reality. And I personally felt very victimized by just the circumstances of the system of losing my father, who passed away at home, and just a few hours later, before his body was really even cold all the way, he was gone
Yeah.
and immediately put into a flame. It just felt so unnatural, and it was very defeating. Uh, to just feel that a system was able to dictate what felt like such a primal thing we should have been able to be in charge of ourselves. And honestly, throughout my healing process, when I discovered Return Home on Instagram, it felt like the answer to the prayer that I put out there to hope like that this would change,
Oh,
because it felt so violent of an action, and everyone involved was so kind and they did their very best. And they must know from dealing with everyone in my scenario in that moment how brutal it feels, because they really did do their very best and they were so kind. But just the system itself felt violating and very making an already out of control time feel even more out of control in a way that felt like your person was being robbed, taken from you. And
no.
to know that you have created not only the absolute antithesis of that, but are giving people the space and time to come and visit their loved one throughout the process. And also just be able to hold vigil for them there is so special. And I hope people listening don't understand the true brevity of the kindness that you're giving, because that means they've lost someone that matters to them a lot. But it's so amazing and heartwarming to know that you exist and that you will continue to expand this knowledge across the country and the world to help bring this opportunity to everyone and have this become more of a common option and choice, rather than something that people pine for and then have to grieve through not having access to.
I you're speaking to my soul because I'd like to tell you a story, if that's okay. I'll preface
Please.
it with this thing that I've developed over the last, I guess I've been here for a while now, 4 years. My belief is strongly that the hands that love people in life should be given the opportunity to continue caring for them in death. And it feels kind of weird in the US maybe to offer services like that. But all over the world, people are very hands on with their dead, and it's okay. It's okay to do it. People don't become toxic waste when they pass away. They're still people, and people should be given the opportunity to invest love in a physical manifestation because it's healing. It's healing to touch your person. It's healing to see them go through the process of not decomposition, but definitely the cooling. And it's good for families to be present for that. It clearly defines that the death took place, and it really actually does help the grieving process. Um, the story I'd like to share with you was a very, very early story. And we've actually shared this on our social media, but a long time ago. And it was a young man who passed away in Northern California. At this time, of course, California was not legalized. It is now, but not open for operation even. So people are transitioning. They're bringing their people from California to Washington for the service to take place. I hadn't helped a lot of families with this yet. This again was very early on, but this specific family had this request. Her son had passed away of a heart attack while he was hiking. It was very freak. She had no idea it was coming, and normally I would say, okay, we'll work with a funeral home in your local area. We can put them on an airplane and we will fly them to us. And she was immediately like, my son's biggest fear was flying. He had never stepped foot on a plane. I don't want to send him on a plane without his consent. And in this manner, it just felt really wrong to her. And they were just Northern California enough where I just thought, I was like, well, do you want to drive him to me? Do you want me to see about, driving transportation? And she thought about it, and she herself wanted to do that. And so as this final act of grand love, she drove her son. We worked with a funeral home local to them, got her all set up, got him gel packed so he was, cooled and in the back of the van. And she drove her son up to me. And I met her here on like a late weekend night. It was just such a random time. She came in, we got him out, and we got him onto our table, and we just spent time. I had a speaker out, we had candles lit, she sang music, she cut little locks of hair. She was hands on with her son in that moment. And as a funeral professional of up to that point, like 10 years, I saw it. I saw this transformation of emotion and grief movement that I had kind of never seen before. I had hosted so many open caskets, and the closest thing I could liken it to is when someone was present for a cremation. There was like this conveyance of their loved one that felt similar in this situation. But early on, we decided we were going to try to bathe every single person who came into our care and make sure they're clean and give them as much dignity as we could. Because if I care for them, the rest of the team throughout our process is going to care for them. So we've worked really hard to establish a high standard of care based on those early days of people wanting to be tangible with their loved ones. And to be able to be on the forefront of offering those types of services, and they exist. Green Burial Council has an amazing list of places where you can place bodies directly into the earth. But this mixed what I was doing before, which was bringing people into my care and transforming them into something. And it took that and made it longer. 60 to 90 days gives me a lot of time to love on people and show them great care. Cremations take place usually in a week. I'm picking the person up, I'm filing the death certificate, I'm getting the urn back to the family. It's been a week or two. Um, we are given such a beautiful opportunity as funeral professionals when we slow down and we ask important questions about putting hands on people and how involved would you like to be? Because if it's legal and it's safe and it's kind, those are our three big rules, we're probably going to say yes. We want to help you feel connected with your person as long as you can. And then when you receive terramated remains back, you're going to see the transfer of your person's vitality, which is the most beautiful gift that we're able to give people, is that no other disposition method that exists truly transforms something into something else. Where if you put two of the same plants next to each other, one will thrive with life because you're literally putting your person's essence onto that plant, and it's a transfer of that life. So it's the greatest honor of my life, really, to be able to do this.
I can imagine. I truly can. I think excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm a crier to begin with, but
That's,
I'm just
I
so
hear it.
overwhelmed with the
No.
beauty of what this is. And I really just want people to understand the level of care and business acumen that has to go in to make this even work in the first place, which also has me in awe of everyone involved and the way in which you all truly love every second of your jobs and treat it as if it is the honor of your life. It is very apparent that there is great care and respect being had. So I would imagine that everyone now is like, okay, so let's get to the decomposition part. Like, how does it work? What does the vessel look like when this begins? Everyone, there'll be tons of links in the show notes. Their Instagram is absolutely beautiful. Don't worry, you're never going to see anything scary. It's always going to be beautiful and just make you really thankful they exist. So please go check it out and you'll get to see visuals of what Brie is about to explain.
At Return Home NOR. There you go. So, John Paul, the composting scientist, has a beautiful story that he tells because our systems are based off of a personal experience that he had. Don't feel like it's my place to necessarily share that, but know that heart went behind the systems that we use in a major, major way. Um, we built a 11,000 square foot facility at the time. We've since expanded. It's almost 15,000 feet now because we've taken over next door as a service space. But we built this facility. It's got 74 vessels that are attached to a very high tech HVAC system that allows for air to flow through the vessels. And it off gases into a biofilter in the back of our facility that is it's full of wood chips covered in a nitrogen rich substance known as chicken feces, chicken poop, because the more odor that goes through it, the better job the nitrogen based covered substance will do of absorbing the odor. So we have this really beautiful HVAC system. And what happens is a vessel, to be frank, it looks a little bit like a chest freezer. And again, this is our, like, let's keep in mind, this is our first iteration. We have not developed further our aesthetics as far as the vessels, but it's always on our mind. You know, we're always striving for better. But essentially what we do is we take this big rectangular box and we put a base layer of organics, and it is made up of straw, alfalfa, and sawdust. Straw is absorbative, straw insulates, and then alfalfa has, did I say straw first? Can I start from the top there? I'm going to start from the top. Um, so the vessel is a rectangle, and essentially what it is it's filled partially with a mixture of organics, and that's straw, alfalfa, and sawdust. The sawdust is absorbing, the straw is insulating, and the alfalfa is nitrogen rich. And what happens in nature is our bodies, if we just put somebody out in the woods, like what you said, over time, our body would break down into the earth, but it takes a while because without external factors, you just kind of go at your own pace, and everybody's body is different. So we put a very specific ratio of the organics to the person's body weight, and then a very specific moisture content of those organics, because the moisture inside of the vessel, it can't be too dry, or then in theory, we would mummify someone. It can't be too wet or air won't flow through the vessel. So we have, and we're walking this very fine line, and our ops director, Chris Stone, is amazing, and he monitors every single vessel. The back of house does 24/7. So we constantly know if there's air flowing through, if we need to make adjustments. So we have this proprietary, built just for us, and very robust system by which we're able to track inside of the vessel externally. So we place people on top of the first bed of organics. At that point, the family may have a service. If we're not, we're just moving forward like it's a direct case. Then they have another layer of that straw alfalfa and sawdust placed on top of them. So they're kind of like snuggied between the two layers. And then they go onto this racking system where there's 3 high and the visuals on the Insta. And essentially, we hook them up to that HVAC system, and there is a temperature and moisture probe inside the vessel. And then there's an airflow monitor that's outside of the vessel. And what's amazing about the human body is that it naturally will break down. That's what we're made to do. It's like when trees fall, when leaves fall in the fall, and if they just broke down into the dirt, that's what the body would do. What we've done is we've created an environment where the microbes are hyperactive because of the nitrogen inside of the alfalfa. And
Mm.
so, with that nitrogen rich material and the right balance of moisture and the right airflow going through the vessel, we can take a full size human person and they will transform into and become one with the organics over the next 30 to 60 days. Again, everybody's different. Bigger people will take longer. They've got more energy to give. And, but we never quite know exactly when somebody's going to, go from A to B. Essentially what happens is they go onto that racking system and they stay there. Their temperature will begin to rise because that's what happens. We have metabolic activity. Like if you have to, I like the example of exercising, or when you have to use the bathroom, you have to poop really bad and your tummy heats up. That's exactly what's happening when we're in that vessel, is our body is heating up and rising in temperature. We don't add heat to the vessels and we don't push air through the vessels because it's like a fireplace. Once the fire starts to burn, it pulls in its own oxygen. And that's what
Mm.
happens to the human body. So we've got this passive process that's aided by the fact that we've got this nitrogen rich material, good insulation, and the body's breaking down. Now, what happens is all of the material that's exposed to the microbes in the body will eventually use up their energy. And we'll see the spike in temperature and then we'll have a noticeable drop. So what happens is we go to an external rotator, kind of hugs the vessel and rotates. It's at about 3 weeks that we do this, and we only do it 2-3 times per person. It's minimal. But what happens is after the rotations take place, we'll notice a spike again because microbes are being exposed to nitrogen. Once we go to that rotation and the temperature doesn't spike again, we know that that person has completely transformed into soil and there's nothing else remaining inside of the vessel at that point except for what remains after cremation and alkaline hydrolysis, and that's bones. Okay, so then we go to screening, where we are upending the vessel. We're removing any stents, screws, implants, metal that people might have in their body. And at that time, the Washington state law is that we have a system whereby the bones are broken down mechanically to become completely uniform with the compost around them and completely unidentifiable. So on the other side of that screening, which by the way, that's the first time we've opened the vessel since we closed it. We don't make, our team does not have to like open the vessel and view contents within. That's also a kind of a hard rule, is that we like to keep things inside, concealed within the vessel, for a multitude of reasons, but ultimately for the mental health of our staff. But we go through screening, they come out the other side, they're this beautiful uniform compost. And then what happens is they rest. We call it phase 2, which is the resting phase, where essentially we're just rotating them regularly and they're off gassing and they're lowering in temperature, releasing CO2, drying down because they're at about 50% moisture. We want to return them home at like 10% moisture if we can. So we're just letting them rest for another 30 days and then they go home. And the urns that we chose were burlap at first, but burlap doesn't it has fallout a little bit, so we've since transferred over to a different kind of like a yard bag. I think that you said it pretty well. It is very landscapey. People can of course bring in their own containers, whatever they want, and but ultimately we're returning people home in as compost. And I'd like to show you. Let me I'll be right back. Give me one
Okay.
second. Those listening won't. Those listening won't get it, but those not listening and watching.
Wow.
So those are the remains. And these are really dry. They're piggy remains because we did all of our testing on pigs with John Paul. But essentially, those have been sitting there for the last 4 years, and we've been showing the same remains. They keep indefinitely, just like or cremated remains do. And so people can have little urns at home. They can still choose to do, more traditional ideas. They can go to a cemetery, or the family can take it and do a memorial garden. Or we had a family postman.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I was just saying I had a family who did like a tree barrier. So their dad passed away and they had the side of the house that got really bad weather and wind. So they
Yeah.
literally planted a row of trees that will grow to protect their family home. Um, you can do some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. We still have a family I served early on who she's got an Instagram for her plants that her husband nurtures. Like it's this most beautiful thing. So
Good.
um, that's the process. It really is just composting in a box, but it is done with the most heart before, during, and after that we could possibly pour into something.
My goodness. Okay. I want to quickly address anyone listening. They're like, I don't live in Washington, but I do like this. Can you give a little bit of a synopsis about how they could reach out to you to be able to kind of plan this out? Flying, trains, whatever, I guess. You would have many options, I'm sure, but how does that work?
Yeah. So people come to us from all over the US. We've served people from like 30 states at this point. So that's what happens. We partner with local funeral homes, so families still have a local resource, and we bring their loved one into our care, usually via airplane, but some people have chosen to drive their loved ones. And we essentially work as the disposition. So we're like the cemetery at the end of the flight or whatever that might look like. So
Hmm.
we definitely help people from far distances, and we've we're really integrated. Katie and myself, our other funeral director, and our lead of family services, our director of family services, we really pushed hard on the traditional industry. So we integrated ourselves into the National Funeral Directors Association, and have pushed really hard to uh, show what we can do to them. They have a couple of awards we received called Best of the Best. So in the last 4 years, we've received two because of the extra work that we put in. And that's really validating because that means that funeral professionals, this is an international uh, group of people and association. So it's Canada and Mexico. That means that all of these people are seeing that this little composting facility up in Washington is making a really, really big splash. And it's validating, and people from across the US are comfortable sending their families to us because they know our standard of care. They've gotten a deep dive of our facilities. One of the things that makes us so special is that we tour people all the time. So people will come in, we'll show them around, we'll explain how the process works. Transparency is key for us. And we're really, really big on enabling people to get the ick out of their mind by actually visiting and seeing what we do. We're kind of in an urban area, but when you walk in, there's, I mean, plant life everywhere. I'm surrounded by like I don't know, 30 plants as we're sitting here. So we try really hard to make it warm and welcoming and cozy and homey. And we might not be for everybody because we might be a little too hands-on, or we might be a little, too gushy with it. Some people just want it cut and dry, but we can do that too because we're funeral professionals and that's what we did before. It's really, really easy to jump back into that mindset. So we love calls, we love DMs, we have a live chat on our webpage where it's either me, Katie, or Micah, our CEO, who are answering the live chats every day. We've done our best to be accessible, and then we don't have extra charges. So our fee is our fee, and then the extra charges only come from the outside funeral home. Another thing that makes us special, and this is something that we're, as long as we can, we plan to, is children under 18 there's no fee for that. So we try to give families a last act of love in that way because it's so against nature for that to happen that we want to be able to just give back as much as we can to them. There's so much that makes us special, but I know we don't have a ton of time. I hope you get to visit someday because talking
Oh,
about it is one thing, but physically being here, it's changed a lot of lives.
my goodness, I can imagine it would be an honor. And my goodness, thank you for that insane, generous gift of giving to what is like the worst time ever in a parent's life to be able to have that without worry of financial burden is just really beautiful and absolutely unheard of. So my goodness, you guys are changing so much. I know we've got very few minutes left, but I do want to mention that you're making such a splash in the effect that there's TerraCon 2025. You had TerraCon 2024. It's just so interesting to see how quickly our people are not only adapting to the idea, but really wanting to figure out ways in which to make it something that is going to be a viable option for where they live or people across the state. So, would you mind just giving us a really quick synopsis? If someone's listening right now and they're like, man, how do I get this in my state? Or what are some resources? And I'm sure TerraCon is going to be one of the biggest resources, but tell us a little bit about that and what your efforts are with that.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely Terracon is incredible because what we've done is gathered groups of PhD composting scientists and legislators and people who pass laws and regulations and funeral professionals and just this amazing amalgamation of individuals from all over the world. Um, we have religious leaders who are chiming in on their opinions on this. And these are all really important conversations. So I think Terracon is probably the number one. Like if you want to go all in and have all the resources at your fingertips, it's very all encompassing. It's in a couple weeks, so it's not attainable to everyone. We also have returnhome.com/, I'd rather be compost. And that is our movement for legislation. So on there, we have a PDF or a Word doc download where you can download and then edit the text to suit your area, send it to your local legislators. It also doesn't hurt to reach out to your funeral directors association. It doesn't sound like they might have as much pull, but they really do. A lot of funeral professionals chime in on this either positive or negatively, and they have a lot to say, and for good reason. This could get weird fast. Death is a weird thing to begin with. It's hard and messy and it is like that for any death, and it's losing somebody forever. And all of those things together make such sensitive subject matter. So reach out to your funeral professionals and tell them how much it means to be able to put your hands on your person and just communicate it and let them hear it. And so I think the main thing, Terracon's amazing. We love sharing it. There's virtual and in person, so it's just as many people as we can get to learn about this. But at the end of the day, if you want it where you're at and it's not there yet, reaching out to those people, the associations, the funeral board, the local legislator or person who might be standing behind a bill like this or has sponsored nature-based and forward-thinking bills in the past. These are going to be the people that you're going to want to reach out to, and we've got the template online to help you with that. we also just absolutely, like I said, we love giving information. So if you want to comment on one of our videos, we answer tons of comments and love to, basically be as transparent and help people understand this the best they can, because it can really transform some people's grief journey. And I think that's what we're all here for, is to help people walk this impossible line of never seeing your loved one again, but being able
Yeah.
to feel their energy and the warmth of their vessel when you visit, because you can feel them, and being
Oh,
able to see the transfer of vitality because you've taken their remains and you've placed them on something that is growing beautifully. And those are just such beautiful gifts that we hope that as people start to accept this more widely, that they understand that it is a business, but we're trying to both be good and do good.
you are not only trying, you are achieving. And thank you so much for that. My goodness, this conversation has been so beautiful. Thank you so much. For everyone listening, if you're just like totally turned on by this and you want to know more, there'll be so many links in the show notes. This is absolutely a movement that we can all get behind. I promise you, you don't want your bones to live in a box for eternity. There are better options. Um, Brie, I ask all of my guests the same final question, and it's this: how do you make your life rich?
My life is rich because of the effort that I put into my passions. And I think that that is my family and God, first and foremost. But right behind it falls the career path that I've chosen and the people we serve. And being able to pour love into people who are experiencing the worst time of their life is a career path that I'm really grateful to have put so much time into. And it's never not rewarding. It's always, and I want to let you know too, I think that every funeral professional you ask would say, I chose to get in this because I want to help people when they hurt. And it's a beautiful group of individuals. The industrial complex aside, the people underneath who are doing the work are some of the best, most loving and genuine, beautiful people I've ever known in my life. And so, yeah, I think that everybody who does something like this or in this industry would say that they're they're pouring love out, and that's what makes their life rich.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Brie, it has been a pleasure. Please pass on my thanks to Return Home. You guys are doing God's work and allowing nature to take its course again, which to me is just such a beautiful thing to be able to not only say, but be doing so well. So
Thank
thank you so much. This conversation was very healing for me. I'm so thankful this exists for others. And thank you for all the kindness and love you pour out there. It's certainly coming back to you.
thank you, Sarah. Well, I'll come back anytime, so